live. I'm always excited for these. Welcome to the 8 Domains of Human Potential, a podcast designed for business professionals, coaches, and leaders who are committed to elevating their well being and success as a whole person. I'm Laurel Elders, the founder and CEO of the Institute for Integrative Intelligence. We're an ICF accredited certification provider where it's our passion to elevate human potential through both the art and the science of masterful coaching. I have with me today Dr. Kristen Truman Allen. She is one of our senior faculty here at the Institute. Kristen is also an executive coach who partners with organizational leaders and teams. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I'm so excited for today's conversation. So, last week we launched our 8 domain discussion with the somatics, which is the neurobiology of emotional intelligence. If you missed that episode, that's okay. We're going to post the link for you in the description. Today's topic is focused on the cognitive domain, our cognition. This is huge. This is a domain that so many of us can grapple with as human beings and leaders, parents, the whole 9 yards. So I'd love to hear your perspective, Kristen. What do you see is important? What do you see as the importance of cognition, especially when it comes to developing ourselves as a leader or even just elevating our well-being?
Well, first, I just want to point out the language of grappling when you said, like, we grapple with this. And I think that's exactly what's really important about the cognition domain because we spend so much time as leaders, as humans, grappling, taking down, unwrapping, fighting with all the stuff that's going on in our brain, all of our cognitive thinking. And so part of what I think is important here from growth and development is making sure that we're conscious that we're doing that and what's informing what we're doing there. Because if we're only making decisions and taking actions from our thinking or from our cognition, uninformed about how we're doing that, then we limit our possibilities. So I think the cognitive piece is where our possibilities come from based on our beliefs and our perceptions, and then how that drives our thinking, which drives our emotions, that then drives our actions. And that's where we see conflict is in our actions and our words. That's where we see productivity and promotions and results. So huge.
Yeah, it is huge. And as you're talking, I'm getting this visual of like our our mindset. And we have a whole class on this, right? We teach
Right.
our coaches. So our mindset can either close us off from possibilities or open us up to tapping into those. That's yeah, it's really interesting. So I wanted to share, I came across this quote yesterday. I was like, oh, this is so perfect. So this is what I was reading that really inspired me, that has to do with what we're talking about today. Men go abroad to wonder at the height of mountains, at the huge waves of the sea, at the long courses of the rivers, at the vast compass of the ocean, at the circular motion of the stars, and yet they pass by themselves without wondering. And this is St. Augustine. And what caught my attention about that is that we often can be so externally focused that we forget to study ourselves and learn from what's within us.
So as you're saying that, as we're studying and figuring out what's within us, where would you want to take clients with that or leaders with that in terms of where to begin?
Well, and I think that's the power of coaching, right? They will, the client will go through that self-discovery process of what is within them. What can they learn from themselves? And we've talked a lot about, especially in the coaching program, like if we are answering our questions and answering our lives through our ego or our limited self or our limited beliefs, and we try to change or create a transformation from that perspective, it can only get us so far. So what I love about coaching, and especially integrative coaching, is we get our clients in touch with their highest self, that highest part of them, and that that informs their decision making, which way different outcomes when when that process is engaged.
It's interesting when we think about, because we teach this and we teach about understanding the essence that we're coming from. Like, are we coming from essence? Or are we coming from ego and those perceptions? And then how that is informing our beliefs and what is underlying, right? Making conscious what those beliefs are in order to change what our ultimate actions and outcomes are. And I was thinking about this recently about how important it is to understand that as a coach. And also, when we see people make changes and build new habits, sometimes they need to well, they need to tap into that essence, and then, but also taking actions, small actions that are aligned with essence will help build their new beliefs around what is possible. Do you see what I'm saying? So it goes both ways, is what I was kind of pondering, and is understanding that it's not one way, it goes both ways. But if we understand what's at the base, at the roots, and what's seeded that, then we can get to a shift in emotion and a shift in action, which impacts all of our relationships, our programming, basically.
Yeah, yeah, so true. And I love that you made the emotional connection there too, because I recall waking up to the power of my mind and how that impacted my emotional experience when I had a friend that didn't respond, and I was worried that they were in trouble, and that because they went hiking, and I was just so scared that I had this emotional reaction when they were fine. They had just fallen asleep and didn't, and they missed an important gathering. So, but my emotional reaction was based off of the story in my head. And yet none of it was real. But I experienced it as real. I experienced, oh my gosh, is this my intuition? Is it something, it was all, it was not real. And sometimes our intuitions can reflect truths to us, right? So this is why I think people grapple with the mind. And that quote caught my attention, because are we learning? Are we becoming self aware? And so in integrative coaching, we look at 5 different ways that our cognition, our cognitive maturity is so important to our well being, and what that link is. And the first one is the mind is capable of understanding truth, but it's also capable of generating an illusion, something that is not true, like a limiting belief that might be
Right.
underneath at the roots. That's that's a big deal.
True. And it can be, if that's true, then it is capable of learning new truths, rerouting the pathways, rethinking what is potential, what is possible, no matter age, no matter experiences, and understanding that trauma and different kind of things impact that,
Yeah.
chemical things impact that, but the mind has that capacity to be able to build new pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to have that awareness in order to discern what is true,
Right.
or at least in the moment, right? Because maybe I think we can also argue that sometimes inside of it, it's hard to know what the truth is
Yeah.
inside of our situation.
Yeah, it really can be. Um, we talk a lot in our classes about how there's the phenomenon that happens, and then we interpret what happens. And then we have a reaction to the interpretation. So we may be, at some points, 3 or 4 times removed from the actual event. And when we become self aware, we can catch the illusions before they start to take root and be more centered, which is connected to the second one. The second one is the mind is the only part of us that's capable of self deception.
Well, I'm glad that we started this series with somatic.
Right? Because say more.
Yeah, because I think if we're only listening to our mind because it's capable of self-deception, and we're not tapping into our spirit self and our physical self that also has a knowing,
Mhm.
and it goes both ways, right? We could have some cellular knowing that is not helpful, that our mind can help us unpack. But if we're only making decisions based through our mind and not paying attention to what our body is sensing and telling us and coming from our heart and information
Mhm.
fully, we're not integrating our whole being in terms of making decisions and accessing possibilities and reaching potential.
Yeah, that is so true. I was thinking before I became self-aware, by being coached from an integrative perspective, my coach was an integrative coach. I lived in my head, my mind, and I wasn't using these other parts of myself to inform what I was doing. It's a shift.
Hmm.
Yeah. So the third one is the mind is the part of us that chooses. It is the part of us that is response able.
Hmm. Man, I'm just thinking about like a couple clients that I've had this week where we were talking about choices and where those choices are coming from, and then all the emotion that comes with our choices, whether we're embarrassed by our choice or whether we're uncomfortable with our choice or being decisive, and where our mind is making a choice, but it affects everything else, affects our emotion, affects our actions. Um, because our mind can also make the judgments about whether or not our
Yeah.
about that choice.
That is so true. Yes. And again, it can generate an illusion about something, or it can get us closer to our truth, um, or we can choose in alignment with our highest self. Yeah. All right. Number 4, the mind is the part of us where the ego resides.
Oh, that ego.
Yes, the egoic self.
Which I think, our mind has learned a lot of things, like biologically, physically, the mind has that space to help us be protected, right? It's sensing when we need to be defending ourselves
Mhm.
or actual safety. So the mind needs to do that work too of helping us make sure that that's what's actually needed in this situation so that we're not just hijacked and being ego based or fear based or defending based, um, because we need to be in self protection, like literal self protection, if it's not indicated. Like it could be an old story.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that you brought that into it because the ego part of ourself, the part that says I am me, I am independent, um, is there to help protect us, and it can turn into a limitation as well. So one of the messages I think is so important with the cognitive domain is that we have all of these amazing virtues within us, right? Compassion, the capacity for love, um, generosity. I mean, these are all these amazing virtues, and the ego's version of things can actually end up limiting us if we stay there. If we stay there and we don't drop into these other parts of self and have those parts of self care for us. So I'm going to be a different if I'm in a defense pushing against something than if I'm in my higher self saying no.
Mm-hmm.
That's not okay. Or this is, it's not that we need to leave um, all common sense at the door. It's just which part of me am I operating through? At one point, this defense mechanism served me, and now I'm seeing it limits me as a leader or, a friend or a parent. So again, it's, I think, going back to that self awareness and that journey that coaching takes us on as we self-discover what part of myself is actually driving right now. So number 5, the mind operates optimally when put in allegiance to the highest self. So I think this is a big one, because in our society, we're taught mind, body, spirit. Notice the mind comes first. And yet, if it's the part of us that's capable of self-deception, is that what we want? Or do we want to double check? Is this, is this true? Is this not true? And then engage from that place of inner truth, inner alignment, inner value, inner virtue. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one.
Well, as you were saying that, we teach, like, and we use the language mind, body, spirit. And I'm thinking of a number of clients who, and just people in general who, when they're making decisions, it seems like they have an intuitive body, spirit, knowing, and then they grapple with it because they're trying to justify it with their mind. So even though we're teaching mind, body, spirit, I think our natural response is a little bit more intuitive, especially after some, there is some knowing, might be collective, ongoing knowing, it could be some recent experience, but we have a knowing and then our mind tries to make sense of it. And then we feel the discomfort if it doesn't feel aligned or integrated. And then just even that information can create an awareness of, okay, I don't feel good about the decision that I'm making from my mind because something feels off. Or, you see what I'm saying? You're nodding.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have a thought or an idea?
Oh, I think I've lived half my life doing that. Grappling with, oh my gosh, what is it? But trying to solve things from my headspace instead of integrating all these different parts
Right.
and getting clearer. Yeah. Well, and what's also coming up for me is in integrative coaching, we're engaging all 3 parts. We're engaging the whole person, right? So we're not just in the mind. And when we learn how to engage the mind for its creative ability, for its action ability, for its choice, I mean, it's imagination, right? Are we in story or are we in vision? The mind's capable of either. It can create a story and a fantasy, and we can have an experience because of that story, or we can engage imagination. The virtue of imagination is vision. And that gives leaders direction. It gives our lives direction, purpose, and meaning. It's a very powerful domain, especially when we become self-aware of how to engage it and how to minimize self-deception.
Well, and as you're talking about vision and imagination, the mind, because it can imagine a story, useful or not, if we're conscious about it and intentional about it, we can engage a story that we want it to be. And so if we're trying to tap into potential, we're trying to tap into possibilities, vision, goals, access, what is even unheard of, right? We can imagine it and then imagine the pathway to get there. So I appreciate how we're talking about how important this is, because it can limit us and it also can free us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also thinking, the imaginative part, when we're coaching, we're helping someone get to the roots of what's going on for them, right? Because we often live at thought and feeling. We experience life, thought and feeling. We have our thoughts that are active, and then we have our emotional responses. And yet unconsciously under the surface, we may have beliefs that are filtering or running how we're experiencing things. Right. So if I believe, well, one of my core unconscious, I wasn't conscious of this until I stepped into coaching. One of my core limitations was I'm missing something. Everyone else has it, but not me. I'm somehow was born missing this thing that everybody else has. I did not know that was filtering my world view, my world experience, until I became more conscious of it. So we can, I think that goes back to that quote of, are we studying ourselves? Are we getting to know ourselves? Are we questioning? I wonder if that reaction like has some roots to it. I wonder what's there for me, but I also wonder what's true. And so I think that this self-discovery, what I love about coaching is that self-discovery, self-inquiry is where empowerment comes from. That's what I've seen and experienced anyway.
Empowerment and hope, and it can come from some playfulness, right? So we can, if we are taking ourselves, I mean, even just thinking about all of this, it's very serious, it's very thoughtful, it's very heady. But if we can get playful about it and imaginative about it, then we can loosen it up a little bit and come at it from a different perspective and not feel like we're being self-aware and judging. We can just explore differently from a different kind of angle. So that's what we do with metaphor, right? We use a metaphor to explore the situation or an experience of something we know, and then playfully unpack what we know about this other thing and then align it to our current experience. And it informs us in a lighthearted, open, a little bit less emotion until we can really get to it in a playful way.
Yeah, I love that. And for those tuning in, Kristen did her dissertation in coaching and the power of metaphor. So I'd love if you could share more about the power that you've seen in metaphor in your research in sustaining personal and professional transformation.
Well, I mean, I could geek out on this for a really long time, so I'll try and keep it simple. But what I found was that when a metaphor is used, then like we just were talking about, you're kind of bypassing the ego brain that's keeping things limited or keeping you scared of having a conversation even. And so it becomes a catalyst to discover something new. So we're just to create a neutral definition for everyone listening, we're thinking of metaphor as a symbol or a thing or an object that you're generating information from and applying it to something else. So I can think of myself as a dolphin leader. We know that I'm not a dolphin, but I can take the essence, right? I'm not, just in case you
Oh,
weren't.
okay. I was wondering.
But I can take the elements of how dolphins behave from a leadership perspective, how they interact with other people, how they communicate, all of the essence of a dolphin, and apply it. Like if I'm trying to decide how do I want to be as a leader, I can apply that to my personal leadership style in terms of moving through shared leadership with different pods of information, how I'm communicating, how I'm being playful, those kinds of things. So I can take the bits and pieces of that and apply it to me, and it informs me a different kind of way of being, and also from a cognitive perspective gives me some new pathways to think about how I'm making decisions. So what I noticed, what I learned in the research was that when a metaphor was used, it becomes a catalyst to create this self-awareness, and then it changes how we're taking action differently, and then creates kind of an emotional response or a symbol that then becomes a self-generated cycle of change. So I have an ongoing way to remind myself, mind, body, or body, spirit, mind, to access for ongoing change.
I love that. Yeah. And I've seen it and experienced it over the years as a coach and as a human being. My one of my favorite examples. I know. The other day, I'm gonna transparency moment. So Kristen and
Oh,
I were,
I know where you're going. Yeah.
yeah. So Kristen was coaching me, and what was fascinating about that is that, in coaching, especially integrative coaching, we're looking for what is the truth, what's the essence, what's the highest self, versus the the defense mechanisms. Is that part of me answering? And what I got in touch with through the coaching was that my leadership, I guess you could call it spirit animal, is a bumblebee. And that, but the essence of the metaphor, using my imagination, just, and it engaged my creativity in such a new way. And I was like, huh, a bumblebee does this, a bumblebee does that. And that, when it informs what I'm doing and my intention, like it brought a whole new meaning and a whole new experience to what I was doing. So just wanted to share that as a,
Thank you for sharing that. And since we're talking about the cognitive domain, right? Like we bypassed the protective mechanisms in our minds, used our cognitive imagination, but also the essence of and the abundance of what's possible, and what is kind of playful and imaginative to inform the essence, right? All on a cognitive level, but using the cognitive piece in the brain as a tool instead of a driver,
I love that.
which is really helpful for, I mean, it's interesting because some people would say, I can't do metaphor, I don't play this way, I don't think this way. But people who tend to be in their heads, or, when they know that they are thoughtful, learning, processing, analytical, that's a really helpful way to help them access other parts of themselves if they need a different kind of movement to
Mhm.
get out of their head. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I have noticed in coaching when a client is really stuck, or if I'm really stuck, it's like we're in the head. Let's move to these other parts so that we can get momentum, and then engage the head for in the mind for creativity and follow through and action. Um, yeah, I think, is that what you were?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you see as the cost of self-deception?
I mean, I think the short answer is limit.
Hmm.
The self deception keeps us from accessing our best self, our integrated highest self, and whatever it is, our purpose, what we came here to serve. When we are in self deception, we can't access our self efficacy in a full way.
Yeah, yeah. And I've seen a correlation between power leaks and the cognitive
Mm.
domain. So, how do we give our power away? How do we drain our energy? Um, I've seen a pretty powerful connection there. For example, assumptions, our mindset, judgments, all of those are ways that we can give our power away. I mean, there's a whole list. Again, we have a whole class on power leaks. There's many ways that we can give our power away until we become conscious of it, and then we could move forward, even in a hard situation, with our power intact or more intact.
I love how when we're coaching leaders, and anyone really, but I'm thinking about people who, I think of leaders as anyone who's influencing change through other people.
Hmm.
So moms, right? Like
Hmm.
leaders who aren't aware of their power leaks, when they become aware of their power leaks and kind of plug it up and enhance the flow somewhere else, it's amazing how transformative it can be in terms of how they influence. And for ourselves too, right? Because we're coaching and we get coached because we all are human beings and we shift back in sometimes into those spaces that are limiting and draining.
Yeah. Yeah, and integration theory teaches us that, when we start to self-develop, we expand our capacity to live in the bigger picture, to be responsive, and to minimize our power leaks. And yet, under stress, our defense mechanisms are the first thing to kick into gear, right? We're wired that way. So, can we become self-aware of that? And at the Enneagram Institute, the research that they did showed that when someone was under stress, they went down in terms of the levels of integration, the levels of development. Under stress, we go down a couple notches because we end up reacting. And then when we can become self-aware, it can pull us back up, and we can start getting back into big picture problem solving, back into our highest self. And it's that self-awareness piece that's the bridge from the reactivity to the responsive.
I'm glad that you pointed that out, because we're talking kind of theoretical a little bit about some of these concepts, and understanding that stress impacts our ability to move through the process and our ability to access our essence in such a powerful way. Sleep stress, trauma stress, emotional stress, like the list is huge in terms of what impacts our ability to even move out of fear or move out of the stress protective response. So maybe say a little bit about, maybe you can think of a client or clients where you've helped them move out of stress first in order to be able to truly, or get them to truth, to be able to transcend or transmute from where they are.
Yeah, I would say always. So I was reading, I can't remember where this was. I was reading how the brain can't both be creative and under stress at the same time. So when coaching, if a client is under stress, part of the process is getting them centered. So that calms somatics, right? Engaging the somatics. Then the brain can kick in a more creative, resourced way. And knowing that with coaching, we are not coaching in times of trauma. That's not our wheelhouse. So when a client comes in, we can help them get to that creative, self-generating part of themselves and get out of the power leaks.
Yeah.
So I just pulled up the power leaks list, and just under mindset power leaks, we have justifications, assumptions, catastrophizing, generalizing, minimizing, self-deprecation, projecting, exaggerating, leaning towards pessimism, rigidity, and black and white thinking. It's either or. And that's just in mindsets. And behaviors, we see loose boundaries versus healthy boundaries, taking responsibility for someone else's choices when it may not be our place to, inauthenticity or camouflaging, greed, not grieving, getting stuck in guilt and shame. I mean, there's so many ways that the mind can step in until we become self-aware of these things. And sometimes they turn into habits and tendencies.
It's why I love coaching so much, because it's so powerful when a client can notice their power leak, and then once you can change it, right? Our minds are powerful. So just having the information can then shift even subtle right? Just a subtle little shift is enough to um, change and get a whole different outcome.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. That's what, one of the things that, one of the classes that we teach on mindset that Kristen, I know you're brilliant at teaching. We it's a process of getting someone into what's at the roots of what's going on, what they're experiencing. So getting the underlying beliefs that we were talking about earlier and shifting those. And what I've noticed when I use that process with myself and with clients is that when a client moves from um, like the fear and the head noise, oh, the chatter, all these different thoughts, when they get clear about what their truth is at the root level, there's this calm that happens. All of a
Mm,
sudden, the brain chatter quiet, and then there's space. There's space for them to then determine, wow, this is actually what is true. Now, how can I move forward? And it's from such this peaceful, grounded place. Um, yeah, it's just it's like clockwork. I see it all the time and experience it when I apply it. When I don't apply it, I can stay in my head running around for days.
for sure. Hmm. We could talk all day about the cognitive domain.
Yeah, yeah, so much to it. I mean, it's definitely it's got its place um, in our human potential. It's one of the 8 domains, and I think that's the message I would love to get across today. Is it is one of the 8 domains of human potential. So it's one place that we can integrate, we can elevate, and we can become self-aware. And even, I think about imposter syndrome, and that's a big one, or confidence levels. And are we attaching to something externally as our source of validation or value, or are we able to go within and get really clear about who we are and what we're about in the world? And can we start moving forward from that space and having that clarity of mind, versus just getting caught up in our thoughts and having that, that worry set in or that the fears set in. It's a different experience.
Right, untethered, it goes all over the place. Like we can
Yeah,
reel it in.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I've also noticed how just one illusion can generate 100 different fear thoughts. And when we can help the client and help ourselves get really clear, oh, that was just an illusion. Okay, that was not true. That clarity of mind and heart can then start coming forward. All right. So any other thoughts before we wrap up today?
Hmm. No more thoughts.
I love it. All right.
I don't
Well,
think so. I think we covered it.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for joining me in this discussion on the cognitive domain and the pros and cons, right, as a human being, what we can grapple with, and also how we can use the cognitive domain to really elevate ourselves when we learn how to engage it. So we hope that today's discussion has been a lantern to you in your evolution as a business professional, coach, or leader. You can learn more about our ICF accredited coach training and our new Leader as Coach program by visiting us at integrativeintelligence.global. We'll be placing links to the things that we've referenced today below after this podcast airs, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you.